Newsworthy or not? It's a question asked in every newsroom every day. The way our Jewish community is portrayed in the media can shift depending on who is telling our story and why.
But returning now today, I have a very different feeling. A feeling of hope, a feeling of positivity. Those that have fallen are now standing back up.
Bring them home. These signs spotted outside the Jewish Federation of Cincinnati, the same message seen inside the facility in honor of the Israeli hostages still in captivity.
CEO Daniel Minson says there's no known threat to the community here, but the security team is at the highest level of vigilance. Just as private guards were vital in subduing the suspects, Cincinnati has a private security operation of its own trained for this exact scenario.
And now more stories are coming to the Cincinnati Museum Center and Holocaust and Humanities Center. Many of these survivors' journeys led them right here to Cincinnati, but they came through the very building that we're standing in today.
The now former board member with Little Miami Schools is accused of using his personal social media account to praise Hitler and deny the Holocaust.
Those aren't careless posts. You don't accidentally follow multiple Nazi accounts.
The Federation issuing a statement saying, in part, anti-Semitism is growing more visible and dangerous. It is devastating that a Jewish holiday gathering was attacked.
So when we come together and we show solidarity, we show unity, we show people we will not back down, we will overcome.
If the objective of terrorism is fear and insecurity and worry, it doesn't work for the Jews.
That light burning brightly, even in the face of hate.
But not every story makes the news. Much of our work happens beyond the headlines.
The relationship between African Americans and Jews in the United States, it's not a simple story, and it cannot be a simple story.
It's got a really long history. I think the civil rights movement healed our souls after Nazi Germany.
There was a very visible Black-Jewish alliance during the civil rights movement.
That relationship accomplished incredible things.
Anti-Semitism remains a serious and evolving problem in our state and across the country. We've seen troubling incidents targeting Jewish individuals and institutions, as well as rhetoric that seeks to marginalize members of the Jewish community in civic and academic spaces. If we're going to confront hatred effectively, we must define it clearly.
With 27 yeas and 4 nays, the bill is passed and entitled.
This is my first Hanukkah in Cincinnati, and I can't think of a better way to start it off than being here with you all today.
We don't always get to answer the question, is this newsworthy? But we can answer, are we showing up? Are we speaking out? Are we building relationships that keep Jewish life visible, safe, and strong in this city? Yes, every day. That's the work of the JCRC. Not always on the front page, but always on the front lines.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. We've got a packed evening ahead and several extraordinary journalists with us. In a few minutes, I'm going to invite Rabbi Samantha Shapira up to offer our invocation. But before I do, picture yourself in Jewish Cincinnati in 1935. 60% of your neighborhood is Jewish. The street is lined with synagogues. You walk to shul on Shabbat. You buy your meat at the butcher shop on the corner, and your kids go to Hebrew day school down the block. Jewishness isn't something you do on the weekends. It's in the air you breathe. For a moment in American history, it feels safe to be Jewish, but there are troubling signs overseas. You open the American Israelite, and news from Europe gets heavier every week. Germany, Austria, Eastern Europe, the Nuremberg laws stripping Jews of their citizenship. By November 1938, Kristallnacht happened, and 30,000 Jews are sent to the camps. Back home, it's not safe either. More than 100 anti-Semitic organizations are operating across the country. It's on the radio, it's in the papers, it's at the rallies in American cities. Then, in February 1939, 20,000 Americans filled Madison Square Garden for a Nazi rally. 7 months later, 5 Cincinnati Jews, 4 of them pictured here, decided they'd seen enough. These founders and their families are part of our living history. No budget, no staff, no office, just 5 people who decided our Jewish community can't afford to be invisible or worse, erased. That was the beginning of our JCRC. Those 5 people opened a door into civic Cincinnati that didn't exist before. I wish I could tell you the JCRC isn't needed anymore, but I cannot. Last February, a group hung swastika flags over I-75 near Lincoln Heights. Our Jewish cemeteries have been vandalized, and anti-Semitic graffiti continues to show up across the region. And yet the Jewish life here keeps showing up. More people want it. Our children are proud to be Jewish, but many of our kids are choosing to take off their Stars of David or tuck them into their shirts, not because they're ashamed, but because wearing it makes them feel a target. Those 5 people in 1939 understood something we're living right now. A Jewish community can't afford to be invisible. For 87 years, our JCRC has been the door into civic Cincinnati. Can I have a quick show of hands? How many of you are here tonight because Jewish Cincinnati matters to you? Take a look around. That's the door. 5 people opened it in 1939. Every hand in this room is holding it open tonight. Let me start by thanking the elected officials who are with us tonight. State Representative Karen Bromley, State Representative Jennifer Rose, State Representative Donnie Isaacson, and the City Council Member Mark Jeffries. Would you please stand? Thank you. Rabbi Samantha Shapira, would you please join me on stage to open us in prayer? Rabbi Shapira is Associate Rabbi at Northern Hills Synagogue and will be serving on our board this coming trip.
Thank you. This week, as we do every week, we read a bit of the Torah. This week, we read the double portion of Tazria Mitzorah. Those who know that this is every teenage boy's nightmare bar mitzvah portion. It is a long explanation of contagious skin diseases that one can acquire, often through the sin of gossip, followed by the steps that the priest takes to cure the afflicted. The priest's examination is done thoroughly and deliberately. He looks at what is shown on the top of the skin and what has occurred underneath in the person's mind and soul. This process reminds us that the power of speech has the ability to hurt and the ability to heal the spiritual, the mental, and the physical health of the entire community. It teaches us that we must be careful with the words we say and also careful with the words that we hear. We must be thorough and deliberate when we read the news or when we hear gossip. And we must practice responding with a healthy mix of wisdom and compassion. May the lessons we have learned from the past year and the visions we share for the future sharpen our awareness of the words around us and deepen our responsibility to respond with discernment, to know that not every word demands the same response. May the work done here tonight help us see more clearly, respond more wisely, and act more justly in the world that we share. Baruch atah Adonai mevarech hashanim. Blessed are you, God. May this year be full of blessings and words of kindness. And let us say, Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi. That's what keeps us in this work. So here's the agenda for tonight. A few minutes of JCRC business that will be shortened. Then Danielle Benson, our Federation CEO, will speak on what it takes the community to be safe and connected. Chandler Wade, our JCRC director, on what's working on the ground. And then we have a panel of 2 journalists, Jacob Kornbluh from The Forward and Marc Rod from the Jewish Insider, who will be joining us via Zoom. And our moderator this evening is Kevin Adelstein, publisher and CEO of the Cleveland Jewish Publication Company, which includes the Cleveland Jewish News, on how our story gets told. And Jeremy Siegel, our Associate Director, closes this out with what comes next. You should be out of here by... It's most important. No one, it's over. First, I want to thank the outgoing JCRC members for their service. Jen Cates, Fred Miller, Julie Jacobson Ruby, and Kyla Soroka. Thank you for everything you've done for the community. And here, when it would have been easier to sit this out, 5 people raised their hand and agreed to join the team. Tal Cohn, Eliza Frankel, Eric Kramer, Rick Michaelman, Brent Stern, and Rabbi Samantha Chaperon. Would you please stand? And I want to thank in advance Seth Schwartz, who will serve as our JCRC chair-elect. Seth, thank you for stepping into this role. We look forward to your leadership as our JCRC chair next year. One quick formality, I need a motion to approve the slate as presented. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Before I invite Daniel to the stage, I want to take a moment. This has been a challenging year for Jewish Cincinnati, for Jewish communities everywhere. The kind of year that tests whether the work we do actually holds. We showed up for every moment of it. JCRC members, would you please stand and be recognized? Thank you for navigating this turbulent time. It took courage, commitment, and more than a few late-night text messages and calls. You held this community steady. This room and the work you're about to hear exists because of you. Please join me in welcoming Danielle to the stage.
Thank you, Greg. And hello, everyone. Good evening. It's great to be with you, and it's great to see this room so full. I love looking around and seeing elected officials, interfaith partners, and people who are showing up year after year for our Jewish community. Greg took us from 1935 Avondale to 1939, 5 Jewish community members who decided that this community could not afford to be in this hole. I want to show you what that looks like today, and what it looks like when it works.
Cool.
This past year, attacks on Jewish communities spiked around the world. The most recent one hit very close to home. A truck rammed into the Temple of Israel in Detroit, Michigan. 140 children were in that building. Valley Temple's Rabbi Stanford Kaufman grew up in congregations. 2 of his children were named there, and that's the temple that inspired him to become a rabbi. It hits close to home, and we're really fortunate that all 140 children walked out safe. When something like this happens, the first question every Jewish community asks is, are we ready? Cincinnati has been asking that question longer than most. We built our own security infrastructure in 2012, 6 years before Tree of Life, which has forced the rest of the country to catch up. Today, the American Jewish community spends $765 million a year to protect ourselves. Not to build, not to educate, not to celebrate, just to be safe. That's the cost of being Jewish in America right now. See? And in Washington, we're fighting to keep federal security grants flowing to synagogues, to schools and community centers. That's what the Federation does. When the worst moments come, we're not starting at ground zero. But security is only part of it. Guards and grants keep people safe. But relationships are what keep our community from being alone. We spent years building relationships with elected officials, city council members, interfaith leaders across every community. We always knew that this work mattered. We didn't know how much we needed it. And after October 7th, some of those relationships looked different. Some weren't there anymore. So we had to make a choice. We doubled down on the ones that helped. We built new ones where they didn't exist. And one of our strongest relationships smiled at you when you walked through the doors tonight. Greg told you what 87 years of JCRC is, the door into civic Cincinnati, and our law enforcement officers are the ones who are standing at that door with us. They don't do this just as a job, but they're on our team. They're a part of our family. And none of this makes the headlines. So what does it look like when this all comes together? It's not always easy to be in a relationship. So when we asked everyone to stand with us on a very cold morning in December to celebrate Hanukkah publicly, we didn't know who would say yes. On the steps of City Hall, rabbis from different streams of Judaism stood side by side. Councilmember Mark Jeffries, whose initiative helped bring the Hanukkah celebration to City Hall, was there alongside us. And alongside us with Greg and Sherry Simpson, the Federation Board Chair, Chandler, Jeremy, and other city leaders. And above us, at the top of the steps, a Hanukkah. That's what it looks like when we show up the city. Now, let me show you what it looks like when the city and our partners show up for us. Cincinnati beat out Chicago to bring the Auschwitz not far away exhibit to Cincinnati Museum Center. The Nancy and David Wolf Holocaust and Humanities Center brought this vision. They came to us and to the Jewish Foundation and to the Cincinnati Museum Center and asked, can we all do this together? 4 organizations said yes, and Cincinnati was chosen. More than 100,000 people walked through those doors. Nearly 25,000 were students, non-Jewish families, school groups, people with no connection to our Jewish community choosing to be there. You walk through the entire exhibit, the rise of Nazis, the camps, the worst of it. And then at the very end, there's a footage from 1937 and 1938, Jewish families celebrating bar mitzvahs and daily life before the Holocaust. So how do you get from families celebrating to the camps? That's the question you walk out with. More than 1,000 Holocaust survivors arrived here in Cincinnati by train. They stepped off at Union Terminal, the same building where 100,000 people just walked through this exhibit. They came with nothing, and they helped contribute to the vibrant Jewish community that we have here today. That's not coincidence, that's relationship. And that's what our Jewish community and our JCRC builds every day. And the person leading that work is Chandler Wade. 9 months in, from the Israeli consulate and the permanent mission of Israel to the UN. He's going to tell you what it looks like on the ground. Chandler. So,
thank you so much, Danielle. Shalom, Erev Tov. It's wonderful to look out and to see how many people of you took time to show up today. This is my first annual meeting, having only stepped into this role last June. For those I have not had the opportunity to meet yet, I grew up in Alabama, and I spent my entire career in diplomacy from the United Nations and to my last posting at the Israeli consulate in Houston. And I couldn't be happier to be starting this new chapter here in Cincinnati. And I'll say this clearly, it is an honor to stand here and represent its community. It's a responsibility I think many of you in the crowd already know. I take it quite seriously. As we see political polarization, violent anti-Semitism, and uncertainty in the headlines every day, there is no question that these are unsettling times, especially for the Jewish community. One of the first things people say to me when I meet them is that I chose a bad time to start this role. Yet, I could not disagree more. It is precisely this moment where I have the opportunity to use my experience in diplomacy and in strategic decision-making to not just weather this storm, but to plot a course that would best position Jewish Cincinnati for years to come. As I will share with you tonight, this optimism is well placed. However, before I dive in any further on the state of Jewish advocacy in the city here at Cincinnati, I want to thank our brilliant team. Greg Miller, our JCRC chair, Jeremy Spiegel, our associate director, Andrea Christensen, our executive assistant, and Tyler Janeski, the newest member of the JCRC team. He was going to be revamping our signature Cohen Family Leaders Light Institute. Without your extraordinary dedication, hard work, and most importantly, your good judgment, we would not be able to do what we're doing today. So please join me in giving a round of applause for my team. Thank you as well to Danielle for leading with clarity and purpose, and to my colleagues across the Federation. Now let me share where we are as a JCRC and what we can look forward to. As Danielle touched on, we have learned a lot in the aftermath of October 7th. Although it was painful, we saw where our relationships stood across the city, across different stakeholders. This was an inflection point. It was critical that we leaned in when it would have been far easier to pull back. Like so many institutions across this city, Marc and Equation Two leading interfaith coalitions also transitioned to new leadership this year. It should tell you something that one of their first calls was to the JCRC. That is because we have been and we continue to be partners who engage in our life. These pivotal leaders knew from our record how the Jewish community values interfaith dialogue and how we seek to empower it. Although just a few weeks ago, the new Archbishop as well of the Archdiocese of Cincinnati sat down with us for the first time. That's just 3 of the litany of meaningful relationships we have invested in this year. None of them happened by accident. But not every relationship, as you know, starts that way. When the No Kings protest, for example, came to Cincinnati, many of our community members showed up along with thousands of other Cincinnatians. Unfortunately, anti-Zionist groups were platformed who directly targeted the Jewish community with chants and violent language. So community members, they came to us to let us know. So we reached out, sat down with the organizers. That meeting went better than many expected. They heard us and learned what took place here as a Jewish community and why. And they showed you empathy. They apologized and agreed to make sure Jews wouldn't encounter animosity again. And I'm happy to say at the following No Kings rally just a few weeks ago, and they kept their word. Those groups were not platformed. And that's what one strategic good faith conversation can do. So sometimes change can happen in one conversation. Sometimes it takes far longer. Patience is everything in this world. For over a decade, the JCRC has tried to partner with the Sycamore Community Schools. This February, we did just that. Jeremy and I were meeting with the superintendent about a community issue. On the way out, we made an introduction on the spot. We got in, we led a session on anti-Semitism. Educators, they engaged, and they asked hard questions. They leaned in, and critically, they asked us back. Providing our school leadership, as you know, with the tools they need to confront anti-Semitism has never been more important than now and in this moment. Cincinnati Public Schools is one of the largest in the state, with over 36,000 students. And I'm proud to share that the JCRC has met with all seven board members, building fresh relationships that will last. And this, of course, also includes a recent private tour of Plum Stream Temple with Superintendent Shauna Murphy, a Cincinnati native who worked just blocks away for years, and she had never been inside. As Rabbi Neil Hirsch ushered us in, I felt an extraordinary pride stepping into that vast sanctuary with its 13 domes and kaleidoscope colors soaring overhead. The legacy of our community in that temple since 1866 is completely overwhelming. And she made the connection instantly. The security challenges that we face are the exact same challenges that are facing her and her students. That shared understanding, those shared values, that's what cultivating durable relationships look like. And it is my philosophy that true partnership doesn't mean agreeing on everything. And if you do, someone is most likely holding back. Now, it means showing up for one another, speaking less, listening more. It means becoming friends. And I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean, you must seek friends. You must become friends if you are seeking true allies. I think a great example is the relationship between the Jewish and Black communities here in Cincinnati. At its peak, as many of you know, it helped launch and sustain the civil rights movement. Together, we have achieved extraordinary things. And we are building on that history today. In my first conversation with my new friend, Sri Marie, who is the executive director of the Holloman Center for Social Justice at the Urban League here in Cincinnati, we talked exactly about this. So our two organizations, we partnered with CET to host the Black and Jewish America's Greeting. Within the first few days, 190 people registered. It sold out. People who had never been in a room together were mixing, they were laughing, and by far most importantly, they were asking questions. And I remember during that Q&A, Rabbi Dr. Zola and Dr. Eric Jackson, esteemed scholars representing both communities, they reminded everyone, when you sit down with someone, you don't know the historical trauma that they're carrying. So listen, really listen. People left that night asking what the next event would be. And that's the type of community and dialogue we are working to bring back. With strong leadership, we promise to keep showing up, stay in difficult conversations, and to be the voice of Jewish Cincinnati. The media and how it covers Jewish issues shapes much of the dialogue we have with other stakeholders across the community. And I'm excited to say that is what we are discussing tonight with two nationally recognized journalists, moderated by the leaders of Ohio's largest Jewish news operations. So please welcome Kevin Adelstein, CEO of the Cleveland Jewish Publication Company.
Thanks, Wendy. Peace. So I think what's that is that economic is all out this state.
Yes, but
Good evening. It is so wonderful to be in Central Ohio, or Southern Ohio. We have a newspaper in Central Ohio. In Southern Ohio, to see so many familiar faces across our great state of Ohio. So thank you for the invitation. Danielle, you and your team have done a fantastic job welcoming me, and I'm honored you've been asked to participate in this very meaningful discussion. My name is Kevin Adelstein. I'm the president, publisher, and CEO of Cleveland Jewish News, the Columbus Jewish News, the Akron Jewish News. We have a partnership with our friends Federation, the Jewish Federation of Greater Toledo, to help them publish Toledo Jewish News. Same thing with our friends at Pittsburgh with their weekly newspaper, the Pittsburgh Jewish Chronicle. And we've even expanded outside of the great state of Ohio and Pennsylvania into Phoenix, and we worked for the Federation there to help them publish the Jewish News of Greater Phoenix. So it's an honor to be in your great city. I'm going to introduce our two panelists this evening. One of them is joining us in person. The other one is going to be in shortly. Jacob, you want to come on up? Jacob Kornbluh is an award-winning British-American journalist whose reporting sits at the intersection of politics, community, and Jewish life. He was raised in the Balfour Hasidic neighborhood of Stamford Hill in London before eventually making his way to New York City, where Jacob has lived in the Borough Park neighborhood since 1982. Self-made journalist, Jacob began blogging in 2008 and quickly earned national attention during the 2013 New York City mayoral race, when his videos capturing pivotal campaign moments went viral and were highlighted by outlets including the New York Times. That early recognition launched a distinguished career that has taken him from Yeshiva World News to JP Updates to Jewish Insider, and most recently to The Forward, where Jacob serves as senior political correspondent. Named to the Jewish Telegraphic Agency's list of 50 Jewish Twitter users to follow in both 2018 and 2019, Kornbluh has become one of the most recognized and trusted voices covering Jewish civic life in America today. It's my honor to sit beside you, Jacob, and welcome to the panel. Here he is. Hi, Marc. Marc Rod is a journalist. Marc Rod, that was a test. Marc Rod is a journalist covering the intersection of politics, policy, and Jewish life. As senior congressional correspondent for Jewish Insider, he brings readers inside Capitol Hill with a focus on U.S. foreign policy, national security, Israel-related legislation, anti-Semitism, and congressional campaigns that shape the future of American Jewish policy. His reporting has made him widely read in the foreign policy and Jewish advocacy communities. And Marc Scoops have consistently driven conversations both on and off the Hill. Before joining Jewish Insider, Marc reported on politics for CNN and on politics and business for CNBC. He is a graduate of Pomona College, where he majored in international relations and served as managing editor of the campus newspaper. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Marc Rod. Marc, you will apologize, and you're going to be looking at the back of Jacob. I don't know if you can see us, but at the back of Jacob.
I can see your faces. I can see your faces. I'm sorry to make you guys turn around. I wish I could be joining you all in person today.
No, it's all good. My 16-year-old daughter would be making fun of my bald spot on my head, so at least you can't see that. So this evening, we're going to dive into a number of different topics we created that hopefully will appease the audience. You have all been given an opportunity to submit, when you registered, your own questions, and I have those with me, and I'm going to go through as many of those as our time will allow. I'm in the deadline business, so I'm very mindful of keeping to a close watch. So I know somebody will give me the wrap up. We're ready to wrap it up and let you all go home, because I'm probably the only thing that keeps you from doing it. So, all right, we're gathering at a moment when covering Jewish life isn't just complex. It's constant, fast-moving, and often deeply personal. From rising anti-Semitism to the intensity of Israel coverage, to what's unfolding on college campuses and across social media. The role of journalism in shaping understanding and sometimes misunderstanding has never, ever been more significant than it is today. In my role at the Cleveland Jewish Publication Company, I see this every day. We are serving a local and statewide and international audience, but we're also part of a much larger global conversation. The decisions we make as journalists on what to cover, how to frame it, God bless you, how to quickly respond, carry real weight, and not without our challenges. That's why I'm especially pleased to be joined by two outstanding journalists who are both on the front lines of these issues every day. Jacob and Marc, we're going to dive right into the questions. Let's set the stage. I'm going to ask each one of you, feel free to chime in. I'll have some that are specific to each one of you, but this is for both of you. Jacob, let's start with you, please. What feels most difficult about covering Jewish life right now compared to even a few years ago? You've been doing this for quite a while.
First of all, let me thank the leadership of JCRC for inviting me. It's my first time here, so I appreciate it, and I'll try to talk fast so I can get all the questions answered in appropriate time. I would say there are a few differences from reporting when I started, when social media kicked off in 2008, and transitioning into the 2020 and now in 2020 talking about the COVID era, and now with everything changing so dramatically. Number one, it's the news that people are consuming, right? In the past, you had time to sort of set, if it's, if you want to write about a topic or something, you had time to inquire, to call around, to write, to wait for the weekend, the newspaper, for the monthly magazine. Now it's just so fast changing every moment. Sometimes the news of the morning is not the news of the evening, especially on the national level. If we talk about the president driving the news cycle, sometimes what happened 5 minutes ago is not what is actually happening on the ground right now. So that's fast changing in terms of the news, but also for us journalists, it's also the audience, but also what people want to hear. In the past, if people wanted to read something, they could have shaped their opinion here and there. Now it's, I'm only going to read you if I agree with you, and I am going to be critical of whatever you write if I don't agree with your politics, if I assume that what you have written, it doesn't align with my politics. And that's challenging, because in our job as a journalist, we ought to be objective, not only for moral, ethical and moral value, but it's also because it's our job to present the news to you as it is and allow you to be wise enough to form an opinion. And if people come prejudged and do have their opinion before even you present to them the facts, then your work becomes a little more challenging, but it's not something that should deter us, because at the end of the day, a lot of people rely on the news, to get what is actually happening, and just to push away the noise a little. But it's very challenging.
Okay, thank you. So, Marc, you're based in D.C., for everyone who doesn't know, right, Marc?
Yes,
You're on the
I'm talking to you from Capitol Hill right now.
Okay, so you're dealing with a little bit different dynamic because of the political landscape of the city that you're in. What feels most different for you about covering Jewish life right now compared to a few years ago?
I mean, October 7th really changed everything. And certainly I echo everything Jacob said, but especially for me, October 7th really changed everything because pre-October 7th, certainly there was a lot to cover on this beat. There was certainly a lot happening, but the volume and the focus from Congress, from lawmakers, and from the national political scene on the issues that I cover, whether that be Israel and Iran, or anti-Semitism, or pro-Israel political spending here in the United States, it's just on a whole different level than it was 3 years ago. You know, every day and every week there are congressional discussions and votes happening on issues related to Israel and to Iran. In many ways, Israel and the impact of Jewish and pro-Israel political advocacy is one of the central stories of the past couple of election cycles. And so there's just a lot more eyes on us, and there's a lot more people reading us, and it just makes the work that we do all the more important. Makes me a lot more busy, but it also means there's a lot more scrutiny as well, and a lot more criticism coming from all sides. And, you know, as Jacob said, it just makes it all the more important to, you know, sort of remain an honest joke and to present the facts as they are.
So Danielle alluded to some of this in her remarks earlier about, we're not just dealing with October 7th, the tragedy that took place several years ago. You're talking about the Tree of Life. You're talking about Australia. You're talking about what happened at Bondi Beach. You're talking about what happened in New York City. Was it Muncie, right?
That's the 2019.
Yeah, 2019. So it's not just October 7th, and it's not just what's happening on college campus. So you have the volume, the tone, the scrutiny has all been raised, amplified significantly. And I think, was this, in your view, both of you guys have been doing this a long time, were you seeing it at this level? Are you seeing it at this level before October 7th? How is that impacted?
So I'll just follow up on Marc. I used to joke that, I used to be that reporter with that unique niche that only reports on Jewish-related issues. So I could, work one day of the week and then come back towards the end of the week with another scoop on something published. Well, thank God I didn't work for you, right? But like in today's days, I feel like Jewish-related issues, and again, it's a good and a bad thing, right? We are under scrutiny as a community, and due to the policies of the Israeli government and all the wars that are happening around the world, but also it's equally important that people get to see Jewish life. People get the tragedy of Tree of Life, yeah. It underscored what Jewish life is, right? And people started to get to know what's Pittsburgh, and the same with all these other incidents, which are very unfortunate and tragic. But people rose up and showed that, we can fight back and we can present the good of life. The same is with our journalism. Although, it's become sort of the mainstream, and, you don't need to be a Jewish publication to report on any debate about Iran, Israel aid, or any rise in anti-Semitism. It's become mainstream, but it's all more important for Jewish journalists, for Jewish publications, who actually understand the underlying of this reporting, to be there in the front and present that. And I think I answer your second question, which is why it's sort of important now, not only because of October 7th. The rise in anti-Semitism didn't just come out because there was an invasion of Israel and a terrorist attack which led to a subsequent war in Gaza. The wars in Gaza have been going on for so long. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been going on for so long. U.S. has served as a mediator for Israel-Israeli conflict for years. It's just everything has become so political, so toxic, and also these are the issues that are highlighted in campaigns. Some say it's anti-Semitic, but for some it helps. For some socialists, you take Zohar Mamdani in New York. If not for October 7, I don't know if he would have been mayor today. Not to say that it's his pro-Palestinian activism that helped him rise to power. It's obviously the whole dynamic of that mayoral election. But it just shows that, the issues that we are dealing with didn't come out of vacuum. The rise in anti-Semitism, the debates on Capitol Hill in Israel was always there. It was just not under such scrutiny, under such, tense debate that we are seeing right now.
We're going to stay on anti-Semitism in Israel for a minute. Go ahead, Mark. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I fully agree with Jacob on that. And I think, having that experience, having that knowledge, understanding of what the state of play was before October 7th and of these dynamics before October 7th, almost folks like myself from the Jewish journalism world cover these issues accurately. And, frankly, I'll admit to encountering some frustration at times with colleagues from the mainstream media covering our issues when they get it wrong. And I think really, the Jewish media play an important role as sort of a mediator of explaining the Jewish community's views to the world at large and explaining the world at large to the Jewish community. But yeah, also just to echo Jacob, the anti-Semitism problem did not come out of nowhere on October 7th. It was already at, record high levels before October 7th. It's only just continued to increase since that.
Okay, I don't know why we keep looking about it. Instinct. That's like instinct. I don't want to be rude. We're going to say...
I can see you guys right now.
I know you can.
It's good to the visuals.
Yes, exactly. We're going to stay on anti-Semitism in Israel coverage for a little bit. I can't tell you how many times I've been doing this in Jewish journalism. I'm a vocational journalist. I have a degree in journalism from the Ohio State University. Notice the have to, shameless. And Buckeyes, raise your hand. All right, there you go. It's vocation for me. I've been in Jewish journalism for going on 13 years. If I had $1 for every time I've had to defend why we've felt a need to cover this and cover that, where we're having to justify our newsroom decisions, particularly as it relates to anti-Semitism, accusing me of igniting fear in our community and sort of like taboo. So Jacob and Mark, how do we cover? This is sort of rhetorical because I know the answer, but I know people want to know this. Okay, how do we cover anti-Semitism without instilling fear in our consumers of our content? It's not just our readers, but because you're a blogger, you blog and presumably tweet on X now, but in the consumers of our content. How do we do that today?
You don't have to instill fear when there is growing fear in the community. I think the rise in anti-Semitism, both from the right and the left, has intensified over the past years. That they continue to be a majority of hate crimes almost in every city across America. If it's a plurality, if it's a majority, in any case, the rise in anti-Semitism, both in anti-Semitic rhetoric, but also incidents, crimes, hate crimes, is alarming. So whatever you do, you're not going to instill more fear, rather it's sort of, like a tip line, right? If you urge people to call in with anti-Semitic incidents, right, where if they are not encouraged to do that, they won't do it, right, there would be a drop in anti-Semitic attacks. But the more people report, the more the numbers go up. But that's good because first of all, it prompts people's reaction to it. Wow. Like if it wouldn't be a rise, it would have become norm. And now we have to act, and we have to act immediately. It also puts pressure on elected officials, on law enforcement to act. But it's also the underlying of that anti-Semitism. If it's anti-Semitic attacks in a certain city, from where does it come? Is it a lack of education? Is it from the right or from the left? If there's a war going on in the world, or especially a war between Israel and another country, you're definitely going to see a rise in anti-Semitic behavior and anti-Semitic rhetoric from a certain group. But at the same time, the anti-Semitism from the other group is still going to sustain. They're not going to give up on their deep-held views. So the challenge is to both highlight it, but also use that as a method to actually, for urgency, to act on that at the same time that you invest in investigating hate crimes, at the same time as you invest in prosecuting hate crimes, you're also investing in reducing that by education, by curriculum, by any other methods, if it's holding candidates accountable for that. All these lead to eventually long-term drop in anti-Semitism. God willing.
Marc, how do we, when you're covering anti-Semitism, how do you move forward without instilling fear?
Yeah, I really echo Jacob on this. I mean, I think, it's fair to say that the Jewish community is afraid. There is real fear that is happening here. People know that this is a real problem. People see it happening in their communities. And so I think, the fact of there being anti-Semitism is not news to I think anyone, I'm sure, in this room. And so for me, really, especially in the position that I have in Washington and, having, the era of lawmakers and policymakers, I think it's really critical for them to understand the scope of this problem, but where it's coming from, how it's happening, and so that they understand the necessity to take action. And so, yeah, that's really how I think, the Jewish community is aware, and to the extent that the non-Jewish community isn't aware, they need to be made aware.
Our newspaper, our main newspaper, The Weekly, is over 61 years old. We were created as a nonpartisan, independent Jewish community news organization. We don't have horse in the race. When both sides of the aisle are complaining, I know we're doing something right. So we strive very hard for that balance. On Israel specifically, guys, how do you navigate reporting fairly when audiences are so often polarized? And our audiences are not just Jewish audiences anymore. Marc, let's start with you. Sorry, Jake.
I just wanted to offer Marc
to
go first. I also want to have the opportunity to say we're
on the same wavelength, buddy.
Well, I'm not sure what happened to this. The camera just moved, so I can no longer see the two of you. But that is a really difficult question and a difficult balance to strike. I think it is difficult because people do have such different views, and I do hear it. Talking to people in the community and outside of the community. I hear it from all sides. I hear people say that we're too pro-Israel. I hear people say we're not pro-Israel enough. And, I think really just trying to stay focused on the facts and focused on, what's happening and why, and doing our best to explain it and to explain, what's happening from a wide perspective, while also at the same time, calling balls and strikes and being clear about what the impacts of policies and impacts of positions would be, I think is really the only way you can, handle a moment like this.
I've been grappling with it, but I want to take issue with the framing, how when we talk about the debate, whether it's being pro-Israel or anti-Israel. You don't have to be pro a certain country or a certain nation to support the very important U.S.-Israel alliance. And so when we cover, I'll just give you an example of a recent development, the vote yesterday in the Senate, which I actually followed Marc to see, even though I was watching C-SPAN, I followed Marc because of his great reporting and he knowing the players of the game. But when you see this debate on, just for the example, on Israel aid, right? This is not about giving money to a certain country just to have weapons. The U.S. has an interest to defend the one and only Jewish state because we share common values and because we were the first to recognize Israel as a homeland for the Jewish people, and we have defended Israel for so long. So yes, this is an American value to defend the state in face of attacks from its enemies. So when you say that, certain senators are pro-Israel and the other 40 who voted to block certain arms sales or anti-Israel, you're not doing justice for yourself, because you still need that partnership of the U.S. Senate, of the House of Congress, of the executive branch, no matter who is president at the time, to foster that relationship and maintain U.S. support for Israel. And so for us, again, because the nuance, because we understand the issues, because we live the issues as Jews, but also understanding for so many years the issues at core, that we are able, when we write about if it's members of Congress expressing a certain position, whether that's warranted, whether that's pure politics, or whether that's a reason for a very serious debate, we are the ones who understand it. But also most of the Jewish readership understands it as well, because you also live there. And so it's also, and I go back to the previous question, which is, it's not only the job of a Jewish publication or journalism to just report the news, but it's also to serve as a platform for readers, for members of the Jewish community, when there are incidents of anti-Semitism, that they have their platform, their views, their fears of what's happening is platform. And in this case, when it comes to Israel, it's also very important to ask the American Jewish community and the community at large, if it's in engagement with elected officials, but also on a personal level, what do you think America should do to support Israel? Or what do you think Israel should do to support and defend us in diaspora?
Thank you both for that. I'm going to preface this by saying, in addition to us being nonpartisan, okay, we are very much unequivocally pro-Israel. So I'm prefacing it. I know the answer for us, but it can't for the audience. Can a forward Jewish insider, the Cleveland Jewish Publication Company, as news organizations, say that they are pro-Israel and still criticize the leadership, and not necessarily the leadership, we criticize Trump and Biden and whoever's in the White House every day. Every mainstream media does, every non-secular publication does too. But can we say that we are pro-Israel and still criticize Israel for her decisions and things that take place in Israel?
Absolutely. First of all, it's not, that when you talk about publications, there's the opinion page and then there's the pure journalism, okay? It's not our job to criticize anymore or to...
Columnists.
Right. And so I'm still young, so I'm not a columnist yet. You might call me back in a few years from now as a columnist. but it's also our again. This whole debate about Israel, okay, and just to go back a second, what you mentioned, whether it's criticism of Israel or criticism of the government of Israel, it depends. It absolutely depends. I asked a few years ago, it was a different government, the Bennett Lapid government, and I asked the Minister of the Diaspora, why I sat down with him, Nachman Shai, probably everyone in the room knows him back from the Gulf War when he spoke for Israel. He was Israel's spokesperson. And I asked him that when the cabinet convenes on decisions of war and peace, do they consider when they launch a war, if it's in Gaza or elsewhere, that this will impact also American Jewry and Jews in the diaspora? He didn't have an answer to that. And so the idea that in Israel, the Americans can criticize the Israeli leadership for policy, absolutely they can. And our job is not only to serve as a voice for American Jewry, but also be that bridge, right? When the Israeli government does something that impacts American communities, in this case, if it's a rise in anti-Semitism or if it's a lack of outreach to certain political groups here in the United States, it's absolutely warranted to do that. On the other hand, when criticism of Israel gets into a sort of like, oh, well, it's the extremist Netanyahu regime, or that everything that has to do with Israel is immediately affiliated with the government, as if, it's not the people of Israel who elected this government, who will elect another government. It will always be the case that there will be certain policies that the Israeli representatives of the Israeli government will pursue that are not in line with the politics here in America. But the core of the U.S.-Israel relationship is of that we support Israel and Israel supports America because of our shared values. And it's important not only to highlight the divisions, but also to highlight the strength of this relationship, the cooperation, and also the success of the two countries on the political and on the security level.
Marc, we're going to shift a little bit to campus, what's happening on our college campuses and social media. I received this text from somebody earlier this morning. Good morning, Kevin. I hope you and your family are doing well. I want to talk with you about getting a story in the newspaper on this week's events at OSU. I run a student organization called Students Supporting Israel. We hosted 2 IDF combat soldiers to share their stories on campus. Huge mob formed outside the venue, and 2 people got arrested. I get pitches like this every single week. So, based on what I just said, Marc, campus unrest has clearly become a major focus. As journalists, what are we missing in that coverage?
That's a really good question. I honestly have not been covering the campuses recently as closely as some of my colleagues have, but I have certainly covered it through the lens of Congress and of, this series of congressional hearings that we've had for the past couple of years now, and the actions that the Trump administration has taken. But, I think, certainly while there is less focus and perhaps, in less high profile incidents like these encampments, the problems are continuing. And the Jewish students, while there are improvements, it seems, happening, the Jewish students, as like that text you just read us, there's still a lot of fear out there, and there still are a lot of problems happening. And frankly, one of the concerns that I've seen and I've heard is that, there was a lot of focus on this for a couple of years from Congress, a lot of hearings. There were, a number of very kind of splashy actions by the Trump administration over the first couple of months of his term, pulling all this funding, passing these lawsuits. And, I've heard questions about whether the same level of focus is there anymore. And it's hard to say that it is. And also, frankly, there have been a number of efforts by Congress now to pass legislation to pass bills to address the situation on campus in one form or another. None of that's really gone anywhere.
Jacob?
As Mark said, and I'll echo Mark now, there's the anti-Semitism on campus, again, didn't come just after October 7th, but it intensifies always in conflict, right? Because you have certain groups who their mission is to create chaos or provocations, because that's their core mission. They are built on protest. They are protest movement. Today it's about climate change, tomorrow about fracking, and when there's a conflict, it's about that certain conflict. Obviously, when it comes to Israel, we are very used to be singled out compared to any other conflicts in any other country, and that's sort of the concerning part of that. But these are the movements that are emboldened by whenever there is a conflict. And so when they see Jewish students harassed, or when they are able to disrupt, if it's Zionist speakers coming, or people from Israel, or Jewish businesses, that's what sort of builds them up as a movement. But again, what I've heard from students on campus is a constant fear. It's not only, it's not only when there are protests, it's not only when there's a certain conflict, it's the fact that Jewish life has become scrutinized. The fact that if you identify yourself as being a Zionist or pro-Israel, that already is a stain on you. Therefore, you cannot participate in certain panels. Therefore, you cannot educate on campus, and therefore, you cannot participate in the free speech discourse as they like to claim they're fighting for. This is an ongoing problem. And again, the congressional action and the action taken by the federal government has yet to show an improvement on that level, but it has put on spotlight the leadership in many leading universities. So a change of leadership in many prominent universities. So people are being held accountable. People are at least implementing certain points of action, even on a legislative level. It's not only the federal government that is engaged in legislation for combating anti-Semitism on campus. You see it in many cities across the United States, that the local municipal legislators are taking action, and that could have an impact eventually, but it's just when you lump everything together, of course, when you see the numbers and you see the bad guys in certain places being platformed for what they're saying, what they're doing, it's hard to see the whole picture and where there is improvement.
Most students like this young lady who texted me this morning don't have the cell phone of the publisher of their local Jewish newspaper to be able to text and say, hey, this happened on my campus. Can I tell my story to you or report? Often, they're just 9 out of 10 times they're taking their phone and they're going out and covering it themselves. Mark, you've built a reputation as a journalist, a reputation and quite a following on social media as a journalist. How have platforms like X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and others changed not just how stories are spread, but how they're reported?
That's a good question. On the one hand, I mean, X is, for better or worse, a pretty critical tool in modern journalism because, to your point, it is how people communicate. It is how people can get their stories out. It is a way that, some college student without those connections that you mentioned can get their story in front of, folks like myself and lawmakers and legislators. But at the same time, I will say there are some downsides as well, because there is an incentive on platforms like X to sensationalize, to take things out of context, to present things in a way that is sort of most sensational and most inflammatory, to get clicks, to get views. And frankly, in some ways it hurts traditional journalism, because, there are, and I'm not going to name any accounts, but there are certain accounts, including in the pro-Israel world, that sort of make their money and make their reputations off of posting these sort of decontextualized clips of and things that are happening on campuses or elsewhere. In some cases, sort of cribbing from reporting that folks like Jacob and I do, without providing sort of that full context and that full credit. And, I think in some ways that, frankly, that's can have negative impacts on the discourse within and outside of the Jewish community.
Jacob? Yeah, I agree with Marc, so I don't have to add anything to that. But I would just give advice to never look at your replies or quote tweets. That helps you a lot. But social media has become obviously a very important tool because of those accounts that, I always say that whenever somebody copy pastes a tweet of mine or a video or a picture without giving me credit, I'm happy, because at least they are spreading something that I feel is important or that is accurate. And so that's the challenge. But it's also important because that's the cesspool of where information comes in and where information goes out. And so it's important to invest time, as a publisher, and as myself and Marc know, that sometimes for us to write the story, it could take 8 hours or even 5 days. And with an instant 5 minutes, the story is over if you read it down to the bottom. And so there's a lot of time being invested in writing and getting the research, but with a post on X, if it's a short video on TikTok, you can contextualize that, you can put that all in together, and then finally, even if it's not a big story, even if it's just a clip of something, you can also post that to prove what you have been reporting or what is happening by just putting the quote of that certain person, a clip of a certain act. Sometimes it's a 5-second clip that is the essence of the story, and these are the platforms where you're able to do that.
So these 5 people have been very thought-provoking in the questions they submitted upon registration. We're going to get to them in just a second. We're going to do them in a round-robin format so that we don't have both of you answer them, so we can get as many of them asked as possible. I have one final question for the both of you. I'm the publisher. You're both reporters. You're often at the mercy of your editors. As Jewish journalists, we're all 3 Jewish journalists. It's no secret that trust in media is very low, whether it's Jewish or mainstream. What do we have to do better moving forward in the day which we're living in? I'll start with you, Marc. As Jewish journalists, individually, collaboratively, as a whole.
That's a great question, and I wish I had a perfect solution to it. I think, something what's critical is sort of staying true to those values of being objective and being honest, and not sort of getting into these partisan knife fights, and not getting into it with people on Twitter and the like. I think remaining true to those values is very important, and the more that you show that you do quality work, and that you show that you hold people on both sides of the aisle accountable, and that you don't show favoritism, the more that you build that trust with the audience. And while a lot of people are searching out for things that only kind of reaffirm their priors. I think, people do still understand and value, at least in Washington, the need for old school journalism to some extent, at the very least.
Take it. I would just add, to continue what we do right now, but also to be fair.
Very simple. Love that. All right. How much time do we have? 5. All right. We're going to go real quick, as many as we can get in. All right. Everyone wants to know about AI. How do you verify? Mark, I'm going to start with you. Please be as brief as possible, just so we can get as many of these in. How do you verify information in the age of generative AI?
It's really difficult. Old school reporting, talking to people, trying to find the original source. I briefly tested out AI at one point and found that it did not, sort of as a research tool, found it did not give me reliable information. And honestly, it's a well I haven't really gone back to.
Jacob, as an everyday citizen, how do I weed out what is fake news and what is credible?
You should read me.
Love that. Bravo, well said. All right. Mark, what guardrails do you as a journalist use to ensure that you are reporting, this is sort of like, you already said this one, accurate information. I think you addressed that one. We talked about anti-Semitism. Here's a good one. These are all good ones. But I don't want to be redundant. Jacob, can you discuss briefly your views on the targeting of Palestinian journalists during the war and what that means for narrative, truth, objectivity, and worsening anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism? Briefly, please.
Yeah, I think we should let authorities investigate any such incident. Also, the Israeli army and the Israeli government should do a better job in explaining the conflict, but also being held accountable if the actions of the soldiers are proven to have been, either the policy is misguided or in some of the facts, then they should be held accountable and responsible for their actions.
Mark, does the constriction of transparency at top levels of the government and government agencies make sources more or less willing to speak to you as a journalist?
Less willing for the most part.
Jacob, take that one too. Same.
Well, sometimes you just gotta use your charm.
Charming Jacob will always work. This is, in the words of a community member, I often feel frustrated with how our local TV networks portray Israel. I feel that many times they do not understand the Middle East conflict. Is there a way we can help? Jacob.
And I didn't get that.
I often feel frustrated with how our local TV portrays Israel. Many times they don't understand the Middle East conflict.
I think it's just engaging. I mean, again, I feel like I do it on my own behalf when I inform local journalists. In my case, I'm in the New York City Press Corps. I talk to them whenever there's an issue, whenever I ask questions of the mayor or whenever there's an issue on the local level, to inform them the facts, but also to be a little more engaging.
So, Mark, if I had $1 also for the times I've been accused by consumers of our content of performing Lashon Hora because the perception is that Jews don't do bad things. And as a local news organization, we always choose to cover what we feel is totally relevant and important to the community, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. How do you manage the tension between your identity as a Jewish journalist and the expectation of neutrality when covering Israel that feel personally or collectively significant, such as what I just described?
I mean, it is difficult, and it is a challenge. But that's why it's important to be a journalist. But I think at the same time, there is value. For example, anti-Semitism, that impacts me, that impacts my community, and that makes me all the more passionate about reporting on it. honestly and fairly and making sure that those issues are covered in the way that they deserve to be.
Mark, because you're reporting from the Hill, you get the last word. Ladies and gentlemen, this conversation could easily go another hour. But what I hope you take away is this. The work of covering Jewish life today is not just about reporting facts. It's about context, responsibility, and trust at a time when all three are being tested. For those of us in this space, whether locally, nationally, or globally, we are constantly balancing urgency with accuracy. I have a mantra in my newsroom. I would rather be second and get it right than first and get it wrong. Anybody that works for me knows that. And I live and breathe by that because it's so imperative, especially today. Community connection with journalistic independence is not always easy, but it is essential. Jacob, Mark, thank you both, gentlemen, for your insight, your integrity, the work each one of you do in the trenches day in and day out. And thank you for being part of this beautiful and wonderful and meaningful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jacob. And thank you, Kevin, for moderating. That was a fascinating conversation. I know you could have spoken another hour. I could have listened for another hour. But I know that we all want to get out of here, so I will be quick. You've heard a lot tonight about security, about relationships, about the media. I want to close with just one question. Who tells our story when we're not in the room? Before I answer that, I want you to do something. Think of one civic leader in your life who doesn't understand what we face. Just one person. Hold their name in your mind. We'll come back to them in a minute. In 2019, JCRC brought over 150 organizations together for a summit on anti-Semitism and hate. The feedback was unanimous. Don't let this be a one-time event. That's how the idea for the Cohen Family Leaders in Light Institute started. The idea was simple. Take civic leaders from every sector. Bring in scholars, researchers, and former extremists. Put them together for 9 months of learning. Then send them back into the rooms they came from. So when we're not there, they are. 2 cohorts, 47 fellows later. Remember when Chandler told you about the Archbishop of Cincinnati sitting down with us for the first time? That happened because Andrew Musgrave, someone on the Archbishop's senior team, went through our inaugural Cohen Family Leaders in Light Institute cohort 5 years ago. He remembered what he learned, and when we called, he opened the door. 1 fellow years later. Take Abby King Kaiser from the second cohort. She brought her learnings to her neighborhood, Wyoming, and asked a question. Even in a community where everyone knows everyone, can prejudice still take root? Her answer was yes, unless you build belonging on purpose. So she used a grant from the Cohen Family Leaders in Light Institute to launch Building Skills to Build a Community of Belonging. Structured dinners, educator trainings, and hard conversations across race, religion, and ideology. 1 fellow in just 1 suburb, but a new playbook for what belonging takes. At the Auschwitz exhibit a few weeks ago, Joey Taylor, also from our first cohort, who's now Equations Director of Programming, stopped Tyler, my colleague, in the crowd to say how much this program still matters. 5 years out, he's still in this work. That's what this program builds. The Cohen Family Leaders in Light Institute's 3rd cohort launches this September. Look around this room. You all are our best advocates. The person that you've been holding in your mind, they belong in this program. If their name is still with you, come find us afterwards. And right now, pull out your phone, scan the QR code behind me on the screen. Have it with you when you walk out tonight. Greg opened this meeting with 5 people in 1939 who understood something simple. A Jewish community can't afford to be invisible. 87 years later, look again around this crowd. The relationships that Danielle and Chandler showed you. The fellows already in rooms that we might never be in. The conversations you just heard on this stage. That's 87 years of showing up. Thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting all the work that we do. Please, we invite you to stick around, make some new friends, and talk to us, and have a great night. Yeah.